Welcome back to another episode of Boys from the Bridge. Now, by the time this video is released and you're watching it, the World Cup would have started. The first game, obviously, is Qatar as they are hosting it, and I am looking forward to this World Cup. I believe it's going to be one of the best yet. There's a lot of good teams, a lot of competition, and I think England can do fairly well, although the South American teams are definitely favorites. So, whilst the World Cup is happening, obviously the Premier League is on hold. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about which teams this benefits, getting 6 weeks off, and which teams probably would have rather carried on and had momentum. So, let's get into it. The first thing to do is have a look at that Premier League table. Obviously, the first game, which is going to be played just after Christmas. So this is how the table is going to look at Christmas time. Starting off with the top 10, we have Arsenal on top. They're in great form. The last 6 games, they have won 5 of them and drawn only 1. And they have 37 points, playing 14 games, and they're ahead of City by 5 points at this stage of the season. I know there's still a lot of games to go, around 24 games to go if my maths is correct. They obviously would have dreamt of being in this position at Christmas time. I mean, the top 10, to be honest, are kind of teams that you would assume should be in the top 10. The top 6 are in the top 10. You've got Newcastle that are having an exceptional season. Eddie Howe is working magic with the players he has. I know they have spent quite a bit of money over the last 2 transfer windows, I believe in the round of £200 million, but they are currently third, 1 point ahead of Tottenham. Honestly, unbelievable. The likes of Brighton, Fulham, and Brentford also deserve a shout. I honestly expected the likes of West Ham, Leicester to hopefully be in that top 10 position. Arsenal, City, Newcastle, and Tottenham make up the top 4. You got the likes of Manchester United that have really had a good season with their new manager. I know there's a lot of controversy and a lot of drama happening with Ronaldo right now, but they sit 5th, only 3 points behind the likes of Tottenham, and they have a game in hand. Liverpool are 6th, Brighton, I didn't even realize that Liverpool were above Chelsea. God damn. Brighton are 7th. Chelsea are 8th. Oh, that pains me. Chelsea are 8th with 14 games played, 21 points. I mean, this is how our last 6 games have gone. It's been a win, 2 draws, and 3 losses. Oof. Fulham and then Brentford make up that top 10. But moving on to positions 11 to 20, you got Crystal Palace in 11th. They're having a decent season, have a game in hand too, over the majority of the other teams in the Premier League. Aston Villa, Leicester, Bournemouth, Leeds, West Ham, Everton. Everton struggling. You know, the last 6 games, they've lost 4, won 1, drawn 1. Not the best. Frank Lampard is definitely under pressure. But at Christmas time, they are sitting just above the top 3, which is, you know, their aim for this season has to be to do one better than last season, which is, you know, hopefully finish around the 16th, 15th mark. And then the bottom 3 is Nottingham, Southampton, and Wolves that are struggling. I expect the bottom 3 to kind of stay like this. Maybe you'll find some teams like Bournemouth to fall away into the bottom 3, but I think I know Wolves are too good to stay like this, but the way they're playing, they can't seem to score. Out of these 20 teams, a total of 134 players have been selected by their various countries and are away in Qatar currently. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the remaining players in the Premier League who have to stay behind during the World Cup are not going to be necessarily match fit, because you have the 134 players that are in the World Cup going to be playing at a very high intensity. When those players get back to the Premier League, they're going to be match fit, have match awareness and sharpness, unlike the players that are left behind. You know, there's only so much a coach can do in training. Even with the practice matches, it's not going to be at the high intensity, and there's not going to be the same amount on the line as in a Premier League game. So the managers are left with the current players. This definitely depends on how many players are chosen for the World Cup from each team. The likes of Bournemouth, Southampton, and Crystal Palace only had 2 players selected in their team to go to the World Cup. So what does that leave the manager? Well, that leaves the manager with the majority of their players to work with. Definitely good. You got the likes of Leeds that had 3 players chosen for the World Cup. Aston Villa and Everton have 4. West Ham, Wolves, and Newcastle had 5 players chosen for the World Cup. I'm surprised about Newcastle. I do feel sorry for the likes of Dan Burn and some other English players in that team that deserved a call up. I would have thought that more players from Newcastle would have been called up. Nottingham Forest also have 5 players. Brentford, Fulham have 6. Leicester and Liverpool have 7. Leicester have the same amount as Liverpool. Wow. Brighton have 8. Arsenal have 10. Tottenham have 11. Chelsea have 12. Manchester United have 14 players going to the World Cup. And of course, as City have the best squad, you'd expect City to have the most players going to the World Cup. And that's what they do. They have 16 players going to the World Cup. So Pep is really left with not that many players to work with. What teams would have hoped that this World Cup never happened at this time? Well, obviously Arsenal. Arsenal on a great run of form. And this kind of stops their momentum a little bit. Allows other teams who have injured players to come back. And we'll speak about the injured players in a second. But Arsenal on a great run of form. Like I said earlier, out of the last 6 games, they've won 5 and drawn 1. They definitely do not want this to happen. The likes of Newcastle, great run of form. Drawn 1, won the last 5 games. Wouldn't want this to happen. Liverpool, I believe, would not want this World Cup to happen right now. They're on a good run of form. The last 2 games they have won. But now you're talking about teams that would. I believe 100% Chelsea would want this break to happen. They are on an awful run of games, not winning a Premier League game in the last 5 games. That's scary to say. Oh my days. But I believe there's reasons for this, not just a new manager, but also I believe a big thing is injuries. Looking at the bottom of the table, it allows these smaller teams, without any disrespect, to be able to work with the majority of their players. As the majority of their players haven't gone to the World Cup, the coach can talk tactics, but they won't be able to get match fit. A month and a half is quite a long time for these players. Teams that have a lot of injured players would obviously want this break to happen because it allows these injured players to recover without having to rush their injury. Let's start with Chelsea. I know the likes of Reece James was absolutely gutted that he couldn't make the World Cup, but it could be a good thing for Chelsea. He is no longer having to rush back from this injury. If you rush back from an injury, there's a high possibility of you picking up another injury, overcompensating, and being injured for even longer. The likes of Chelsea have a huge amount of players out. Ruben picked up an injury in his last game. You got the likes of Ben Chilwell that's expected to be back late December. Reece James is also expected to be back late December. Kepa is injured. Unfortunately, he didn't make the Spain squad because of his injury, and I am gutted for Kepa. You got Wesley Fofana that should be back by the time the Premier League kicks off, and N'Golo Kante is still expected to be out until mid-February. That's a very long time, and I cannot see Chelsea renewing his contract just because of his injury woes. So, for a team like Chelsea, definitely good. You're going to have players like Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Fofana, Reece James, Ben Chilwell, all expected to be back by the time the Premier League kicks off again. And you know how important these wing-backs, especially Reece James and Ben Chilwell, are to Chelsea playing well. When they're fit, we can beat anyone. Leicester City also have quite a few players out. They have Bertrand, Soyuncu, Pereira, and James Justin. These are just some of the players that are out. Liverpool have a lot of players out too. They have Jota, must be gutted that he couldn't go to the World Cup. Matip, Luis Diaz, Arthur, who they don't really care about. Now City, they have the biggest squad and literally have no one injured. The only player that they have injured currently is Kyle Walker. And you know what? Kyle Walker is with the England team at the World Cup. So he's still expecting to play. He's not going to be playing 90-minute games every single game, but I believe that probably not for the first or the second game he'll start. I believe that he'll be brought off the bench, given probably about 30 minutes, build his match fitness up to by the time we get to the knockout rounds, everyone is expecting England to get to the knockout rounds, which could be a bad thing if we're not giving enough credit to these teams. Newcastle, obviously, they're outstanding this season. Isak, that they recently bought, is expected to be back from injury in late December. That'll give him some confidence. But yes, those are the majority of the teams with the biggest injury list. I believe some teams would have never wanted this World Cup to happen now, and some teams are delighted for the break. So let me know what you think, what team you support, and whether you think this World Cup happening now is a good idea or a bad idea. But till next time, see you later.